Welcome to Call Your Hits, a Storm Riders Airsoft podcast. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Today, it's just me, Phil, in the studio here by myself, and I've got a bit of a hodgepodge of things that we're going to talk about. I want to start off today by talking about some comments that we've gotten recently on some of our videos and talking through those. I'll talk to you as well about sort of what's been going on with us lately in terms of what we've been doing airsoft-wise and some of the operations and planning that we have for that coming up very soon. Also want to talk a little bit about Iron Horse. That's still very much in the cards, and I want to give you an update on where we are with all that. And then finally, at the end, I want to take a bit of time talking about our YouTube channel. So for those of you who are listening perhaps to the podcast on Spotify or Google Podcasts or wherever else, you may not realize that we actually have a YouTube channel where, aside from uploading our Call Your Hits episodes, we also tend to sometimes put out long form content. That's in fact how we started making airsoft content many years ago. And it's actually surprising to me how many of our listeners who join the Discord actually don't necessarily realize that we have a channel. So I want to talk a little bit about that towards the end, as well as what that's going to look like potentially in the future. So with that being said, let's dive in. And what I want to start off with today is actually a comment that was put on one of our older videos a few years ago. We did a video called 4 Tips on How to Avoid Getting Hit in Airsoft or something like that. And one of the things that we often recommend to players to avoid getting hit in airsoft is to not be afraid to go prone, right? So that is to hit the deck, to go on your belly as low to the ground as you possibly can. And this does a number of things for you, which I'm not necessarily going to get into too much here today. But one of the comments that we got on this video was from this absolute lunatic who was saying that everybody agrees that going prone in airsoft is completely useless. It's completely detrimental to everything that you're supposed to do in airsoft, because it makes you slow and it has no benefits and so on and so forth. And initially, I thought that this person was just being a troll, so I replied something with like, "Yeah, lol, okay, fine, whatever." And then they came back and they kept coming back about this kind of stuff, saying, "Oh well, they know better than me because they've been doing this in real steel longer than me," and all this kinds of stuff. And I thought this was a really interesting comment, and it was something that I wanted to put out there to talk about with you guys and to share some of my thoughts on it. Because one of the things, and we've talked about this many times on the podcast before, one of the things that the Discord and the conversations that I've had with airsofters from really around the world has really taught me is that airsoft is huge. It's as Rob from Gunfather Milton said, airsoft is a big tent, right? There's a lot of different people playing airsoft in all kinds of different ways. And the way that we play airsoft here in St. John's, Newfoundland is not the same that the way that you play in, Jamaica, Vermont when you're playing one of those big ops like Jordan was playing months ago, or it's not the same way that, Ben Frosty in Australia is actually playing airsoft in New Zealand right now at time of recording. And he's not playing airsoft the same way. And so one of the things that often happens is that you have an opinion, especially when it comes to airsoft, that you say, well, everyone can agree with this. And the reality is that not everyone plays airsoft the way that you do. So whatever your opinion is not going to speak for everyone. There's tons of different situations that I can think of in which going prone is absolutely beneficial. We talked about it on the Discord when I was sharing this in the meme channel. But it's true. I mean, if you think about, you could be out on a combat patrol, for example, if you're playing a milsim game and you get ambushed. What should you do if you don't have available cover? Obviously, you're not just gonna stand there and take the hit. You're gonna go prone, right? Try and make yourself as small as possible. Or you could be in an attack and defense situation where your job is to defend a particular point and there's not a lot of really good cover available. So you want to utilize micro terrain. What are you going to do? Just stand there? No, of course, you're going to go prone, right? So there's tons of different situations in which you would actually use this as, to benefit yourself in a tactical sort of way. But if you've never experienced those, or if you only play CQB or you only play Speedsoft, then yeah, going prone is probably not going to be what you want to do. But I think more than the actual practicality of it, and to be honest, I've got a video ready to go to record talking all about going prone in situations where it works and how you might think about going prone. So, I'll park that for later. But just the idea that you're coming out there and you're saying, well, everyone can agree this is stupid. Well, no. If those are the words that you're thinking about, everyone can agree, you're probably not on the right path, number one. And then the second part that I thought was really interesting that I mentioned in the intro is they said, "Well, I've been doing this a lot longer than you. I have a lot more experience than you in the real steel world and all kinds of other irrelevant things." When the reality of it is just because someone has more experience or more authority than you on a particular topic does not actually mean that they're right. If someone is telling you that this is a good idea, and if you ask them or you challenge, hey, why is that a good idea? And their response is, trust me, I've been doing this longer than you. That's useless. That's garbage, right? Someone who actually knows about a particular topic should be able to elucidate to you why they believe a particular thing. They also should be willing to have their views challenged. And if you guys know me and you know some of the conversations we've had on the Discord and others, I have no problem with my opinions and the things that I say being challenged, because either I am right and I'm happy to defend my position, or I'm wrong and I've just learned something. The example I've given numerous times before is with our good buddy Matt, who, when I was saying that reloading your primary replica is always faster than drawing your secondary replica, he was saying, actually, bud, I don't think that's true. And this was a held belief that I had. But then I experienced a situation where I actually was doing a reload and it was slower and I drew my sidearm was way faster. And I'm like, oh, wait. So in this particular situation, actually, I was wrong and Matt was right. And, we've joked about it and stuff like that. And he doesn't particularly care whether he was right or wrong. What I'm getting at is I learned something and I was open to being wrong about it. So that's one of the things when I see these types of comments, these sort of, for lack of better terms, these appeal to authority. It's like, oh, believe me, it's like, that's garbage. I need you to explain to me why your point of view is what it is. In this conversation in particular, it said, well, your team should always be moving. You even say so in some of your other videos. It's like, yeah, but there are situations where you aren't going to be moving because that's not the objective. That's not the game, and so on and so forth, right? So ultimately, if you have an opinion about airsoft, if you have an opinion about something that you think is better than something else, you should be able to explain to people why, using arguments and logical examples and situations where this has been beneficial to you. The reality is that when you talk about going prone in airsoft in particular, especially at shorter ranges, y'all know that airsoft replicas fire BBs that are hop, which means they curve up. Well, if someone is like, 10 meters away from you, like 30 feet or something like that, it's quite possible that those first couple of shots are going to zip right over your head before the shooter realizes, oh, hang on, I need to adjust. And that might be the amount of time that you need to be able to tag them out before they hit you. That's a tremendous advantage, right? So going prone in airsoft, absolutely, it's a tactical decision. And like I said, I'm going to be doing a video about this in the future, so I'm not going to belabor the point. But what I really want you to think about is when you have opinions about airsoft, especially if you're going to go and you're going to comment to people about why this is the opinion that you hold, you absolutely should be able to have a conversation that supports your position with facts and examples. And anecdotal evidence is fine. I mean, especially for airsoft, like, we have lots of situations where you might not have concrete data to show, oh, well, in these 100 situations, but you could say, in my experience, this is how I've seen it, right? And to come back to being prone, in my experience, there have been lots of times where I've been prone and it's been to my advantage, and it hasn't particularly, set back the team in terms of mobility and stuff like that. So these are the kinds of things you want to think about. Now, all that's being said, the main takeaway here is you got to be open to trying new things. We've talked about this many, many times. Fundamentally, for us, when it comes to airsoft, we are always open to looking at different perspectives and seeing if there's ways of doing better. And if that's true, then it means that you have to be open to being wrong about stuff. And there's no shame in that. right? If this person who was this, I mean, they say well, they were a lunatic because they were just all over this. That's beside the point. If this person had said, okay, well, I don't agree with you. Here's why. Here are the things that I think make sense to me, and so on. And to be clear, that's not how the conversation went. But if they had been, you can have a conversation with them, and then you can make up your own mind. But anyways, that YouTube comments are not exactly the place where you're going to have erudite discussions about fundamental concepts. However, as I've mentioned many times before, the Discord is a place where you can have those conversations. So if you're interested in not being a lunatic, or I guess being a lunatic in a different kind of way, you can join the Discord and we can have those conversations. And again, you as an airsofter, whatever you've experienced is not the way that airsoft is around the world, because there is not one single way that it is, right? That's just point blank. So what works for me, what's worked for me historically here might not work for you, and that's fine. Matt plays at CQB City every single week, or whenever he can. Matt, I'm not trying to figure out your schedule, but regardless, like, he's out there, and the airsoft he's playing is not the same airsoft that I'm playing. I would love to experience it. I have no experience in those kinds of things, but it's not the same. So for me to tell Matt, hey, do this, it's like, why? Right? That's not. So what we're trying to share in all of our videos, and talk about that later, is really around what are some concepts that you can think about? What are some things that you can hear about from our experience, and see whether or not they apply to you? And if they don't apply to you, well, then that's great, right? Now you've just found one other thing that doesn't actually work for you, and that's okay. So this is really where whenever and to be fair, most of the comments that we see on our YouTube channel are absolutely fine. They're constructive. It's just when I see stuff like that, I'm like, this person um really doesn't really understand, like, the scope of the type of content we're trying to create, but also is not looking at the problem in the right way. And to be honest, if they feel that going prone is always detrimental, they're actually stealing you know some development and some ability from themselves, because they're sort of preventing themselves from benefiting from something that could actually be useful, tactically, situationally for them. So just something to consider. The second thing I want to talk about, I wanted to give you a bit of an update on what's been going on lately with us with respect to airsoft. So, airsoft here is on the not the last leg certainly, but the season is starting to wrap up. So the temperature is starting to drop. The outdoor night games have stopped because it gets dark rather quickly here. So we are, we are more north than many of you listening, probably. And so what that means for us is that during the summer we do have much longer days, but during the winter, really, in the fall as well, our days are much shorter. So to give you an idea, today, so we're talking about basically the middle of October when I'm recording this. When I get up in the morning at, let's say, 7 o'clock, the sun is just barely rising, right? So it's still a little bit dark even at 7 o'clock in the morning. And then generally by 6 o'clock, it's starting to get quite dark. 6:30, you'll have your sunset, and then you're done. So if you think about the outdoor open on Thursday evenings at Frontline, that usually doesn't start till 6. So even though they have field lights and stuff like that, you really don't get a lot of actual available light. And it makes for some really dark games, which is fine, but really is not what most people are looking for. So the amount of light that we have available is pretty low. So those games are starting to slow down, and the weather is getting colder. Now it's not super cold yet. I mean, just even today it was only like 13 or 14 degrees Celsius. Not quite sure what that is in Fahrenheit, but I'm sure someone can figure it out. Anyways, point is, not super cold, but it is cooling off. And so at the end of the month, so on the 21st of October, which I believe is going to be the Saturday after this episode airs, that's going to be our official season closing event. So this year, in collaboration with Frontline Action, the Storm Riders we agreed to hold two airsoft events. The first was Operation Last Refuge 2, which was held in May, I believe, at the start of the season. And now we're having Operation Last Refuge Spore Cloud, which is our end of season event. A lot of time and prep has gone into this event. We are actually including a lot of different mechanics that we have picked up over the year, talking with a lot of you about the kind of games that you are playing in your particular area. This event is an asymmetric event, so we have two teams, but they're not the same size. We have one team that is going to be doing much more like hit and run, guerrilla style sort of raids on a larger team, but the larger team has the whole field basically to protect. So they have to figure out a way to divide their forces to allow themselves to complete their objectives throughout the day. In doing so, they may find themselves in situations where actually numerically blue is superior. Blue team is the smaller team, red team is the larger team. So they will have situations potentially where blue team is temporarily numerically superior. So they have like 8 guys attacking, maybe only 3 or 4 defenders, and so those defenders need to be reinforced from elsewhere on the field. But if they do it quickly enough, they might get overrun. Blue can, complete their objectives. And the neat dynamic that we have this time is that blue has the ability to move, not to fight, but to move outside of the normal field bounds. So they can actually come out of the woods, basically, attack people on the field, and then retreat back to the woods and then move around. So it's a really neat mechanic. It's something that we've never tried before, and it will be completely new for a lot of these players. Additionally, we've included a couple of different mechanics. One that I just completely lifted from the Stag Ops event, Midsummer Nightmare, that Jordan was at, the Redcon mechanic, or readiness condition withdrawal mechanic. So basically, the blue team is going to be operating as a squad, and then there will be no individual respawns. It will only be squad-based respawns once the whole team redcon. So once they return to their staging area because of lack of ammo, supplies, or they don't have enough people left alive. Those rules are mechanically more complicated, and so we have limited the number on the blue team, for the asymmetric aspect, but also because it's going to be easier for us to make sure that a smaller group of players actually fully understands the rules before they hit the field. In addition to that, we are doing a pre-game rules briefing the night before. We're doing a rules briefing the morning of. I did a live streamed rules briefing with a live Q&A, which I also shared the recording of on the main event page and stuff like that, as well as a PDF version of the rules. So we've made it super accessible for players to read the rules, and this was very important to us because, unlike for many of you listening, we don't necessarily have a very long history of running these kinds of events. So yes, historically we've run many events in the past, but none of the players who are playing at this event coming up, this is, for many of them, this is going to be their second event, and for some of them it might even be their first. So where, although we have longevity in terms of how long our airsoft community has been around, we don't have a lot of history and a lot of know-how when it comes to actually attending and playing these kinds of events, unlike many of you who might be listening and have attended larger events, whether it's border war in Europe, or whatever AMS games, local or federal level, national level games in the States. So all this to say, this is more complicated. This is more challenging, especially for the blue team, the numerically smaller team. There's going to be a lot of moving around, a lot of carrying their gear, a lot of periods of waiting and anticipation for the right situation to come up, quiet observation, etc. Some of the players, they're fairly new. They're players who really started only playing airsoft this season, maybe last season, and some of them are more experienced. Of course, they've been here a while, and so it's going to be even more important in this situation for the experienced players to sort of coach and mentor the greener players. It's also the first event where we have made camouflage requirements and equipment requirements. So for the blue team, they absolutely have to have green based camouflage. So we were pretty loose in our definition of green based. So we said, it could be olive drab, woodland, M90, cadpat, Flecktarn, all of that would be okay. We just didn't want to have stuff like multicam or desert or whatever, just because they're going to need to rely on camouflage and concealment. So that was one thing. But we also made it a requirement for every single player to have a radio, which is not something that we've done before. And many of those players may not have had a radio before this event. And the purpose of this was twofold. One, because fundamentally it's going to be very, very hard for that team to operate without radios, especially given the Redcon rule and stuff like that. But also, it was a way for us to introduce to many of these, especially newer players, hey, there's a lot more to airsoft than just run around the field like, screaming, shouting, etc. Like if you have a radio, you can communicate and coordinate, and they're going to get to experience that firsthand. So this is something that was really important to us as well. So this event is going to be super neat. There's a lot of different mechanics to keep both of the teams occupied. Fundamentally, it is the successor to the last game. So at the end of the last game, the red team won, and what they were trying to do from a lore standpoint. I know many of you, Sam, I hear you. You're not here for the lore, but just to explain it a little for everybody else. Um, the first game, essentially, they were saying that there was a particular type of fungus in this area that could be harvested to create combat stims. So both teams want to fight for control of the area and ally with the villagers who could help them find and harvest the fungus. So after that game, red team won. So now in the lore, red team is allied with the villagers and they're starting to do the fungus harvesting operation. So what's going to happen during the day is that there will be fungus harvesting points on the field where villagers will be harvesting this fungus, giving it to the red team, and then the red team will be bringing those samples to their scientist in the village to create shipments of the combat stims, and then taking those shipments and then bringing them either to a shipment delivery point to score victory points, or holding on to them and then scoring points at the end. Meanwhile, the blue team is going to try to interfere with that by either stealing or destroying either samples or the shipments by attacking the villagers, attacking the red team, and trying to prevent that sort of supply chain from moving around the field. So the red team will have to balance the production aspect of making sure that they're producing victory points, and the blue team will have to try and maximize their strategy and their tactics to potentially weaken certain areas and attack other areas, and so on and so forth. It's been really engaging working with the commanders, to get them to understand and to start thinking a little bit about their strategy. So yeah, so it's something that we're very excited. It's again going to be completely new. We haven't tried anything that involves victory points that are supply chain logistics based rather than field controlled based. So the thing about this event, and Blue is very clear on this, if Blue doesn't do anything, Red is going to win because they have everything they need to create those shipments and then score points. So Blue absolutely needs to interfere. They want to they want to interfere in smart ways, however, because they want to not only disrupt the enemy but score points. And so doing that is going to be more challenging for them because numerically they're weaker, but they have a lot of tools and all this kind of stuff. So it's a very complex game from an organizational standpoint. I have a lot of notes. I have a lot of things that are sort of ready on the back end to accommodate the situation as best we can. But it should be a lot of fun. And again, it's not something that, firstly, we've never run an event exactly like this. So that's one thing. But number two, it's not something that the community has ever encountered either. So we're really looking forward to it. We also made a bunch of changes. I think this is a very, very important thing for people to consider when they're thinking about running games like that. At the end of last game, we provided a feedback form to people and said, "Hey, what did you think? Give us your thoughts. What did you think about very specific things that we wanted to know about? So, what do you think about this, 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 this?" And we took a lot of that feedback, and most of the feedback was positive, but certain pieces of feedback were actually constructive. Well, we actually took that feedback and we implemented it. We implemented rules changes, and changes to the gameplay mechanic, as well as to some of the props. We had some feedback on some of the props being kind of, for lack of a better term, shitty. So we've made some changes on that. And I think it's super, super important to do that because ultimately your players are your customers, whether or not they are your paying customers or not. And in my case, I'm not getting paid. I'm just doing this to support and prop up the community. But all the players are still my customers. So I want to make sure that they feel they're getting a good experience. And so I need to listen to them. One of the things that came up had to do with radio, so we took care of that. It's in the rules. Another thing that came up was I was saying about the props, so we took care of that too. And when the players hit the field, they'll be able to see, oh, hey, especially those who had something to say about it. Oh, I mentioned this last time, and that's not an issue anymore. Cool. Right. So if you're an organizer, you're thinking about running games, I highly encourage you to start thinking about getting feedback from the players. And it's always a gamble, and I understand how you might feel, because some people can tell you maybe they didn't enjoy themselves. Maybe they had a shitty time. Maybe they thought that the game was stupid. Maybe they thought your objectives were boring. Maybe they thought it was unfair. And when you put so much effort into something, it can be very hard to get feedback. It's your baby, and people are telling you that they didn't like it. You have an ugly baby. Like, that's not fun. And so I can understand the reaction of not wanting to hear that feedback, just because it might hurt your feelings. But I would tell you, and to be honest, like, when I read those negative comments, it still hurts my feelings too. It's just I can contextualize them and say, well, yeah, that's fine. What I care more about is making sure that if it's something within my control, it doesn't happen again. People might give you feedback on stuff that you don't actually have control over, or that has nothing to do with you. Well, nothing you can do. You just gotta let it go. It's that person's problem, or it's that something that they, like, if they had a disagreement with the player that you were not made aware of. Unfortunately, there's nothing you can do. You weren't aware of it, so whatever. But most of the time, people have fun, and you will every now and then get a nugget. And if you do get that nugget, it really behooves on you to do something about it. So we're really glad to have been able to make some positive changes, and I hope that the players have fun with it. I know we've been having fun sort of with the planning and getting everything sorted, and yeah. So one of the very future episodes, you can expect to hear a bit of a debrief on how everything went. Hopefully, I'll be here telling you how great and amazing it was, and not how much of a nightmare everything turned out to be. Fingers crossed. But yeah, I think we've got a lot of stuff that's underway, so we're really happy about that. So that's what's been going on there. The other thing that has unfortunately been going on, and sort of I mentioned this before, in terms of like training and stuff, I actually ended up injuring myself. So I haven't been training as much as I wanted to, and thinking about, Iron Horse was a big thing for us, and so as a consequence of that, I haven't been playing a lot of airsoft. I've been trying to stay off my foot to save it. It was kind of a double-edged sword, unfortunately, in that I had a big event coming up at the end of the month, and so I hadn't been playing airsoft specifically to avoid injuring myself, and then I ended up injuring myself anyway, and now I can't do my event at the end of the month, which sucks. Which, I'm not here for the boohoos, but it's just timeline wise, it means that it's been about a month since I had last played, so it is what it is. But I'm really looking forward to the event coming up on the 21st, and hopefully, if any of you are listening, I will see you there. Couple of last things. There's two other things I want to talk about. One has to do with Iron Horse, and the planning for that. So since we last spoke, I think, I don't know if we mentioned this before, but anyways, the dates for Iron Horse, AMS Iron Horse, have been released. It's in early June, the first weekend of June, which I think is June 6th to 8th. Don't quote me on it. I don't have the calendar in front of me, but it's that first weekend. Actually, I'm just going to look it up because I want to be 100% sure I'm not giving you bad information. It is June 7, 8, and 9. So there it is. So June 7, 8, and 9 are the Iron Horse dates. We are in the Discord planning. So if you are planning on attending Iron Horse, and you are looking to be part of the Stormriders Foreign Legion, which we'll talk about in a second, make sure to send me a DM on the Discord, and we'll add you to the planning chat. So we've been looking at the different dates. Myself and John will be flying in. We'll be down in Georgia for about a week, so we'll be doing a bunch of extracurriculars in addition to Iron Horse. But the plan is for us as a group to be able to link up at the event. Hopefully, depending on how many people show up, we can have a full squad of Stormriders Foreign Legion, maybe more than one, depending on how many people come. So we are in the works and planning all of that stuff. We're looking at logistics, so we're looking at how can the people who are coming perhaps share lodging to reduce the cost, etc. How can we share, if there's an opportunity for us to share ammunition, to look at bulk savings for pyro, etc. So those are the kinds of things that are going to be really relevant. Now, obviously, this is really far away. Like we're talking about 8 months, right? So, or just under 8 months. So you have, if you're interested, I mean, you have a lot of time to start saving and to start planning. Um, and it's going to be really, really cool, no doubt. Well, not literally, it's actually going to be quite hot because it's going to be the middle of June in Georgia. But regardless, yeah, so we've got people coming from all around the US, as well as myself and John coming from Newfoundland, Canada, and Ben maybe even coming with at least one other person from Australia, which is wild. Um, so it's going to make for a really well international event, no doubt. But it's going to be really fun. We're going to have such a great group. Some of us, especially who are foreign nationals, are not legally allowed to rent night vision optics. So playing a night game is not necessarily something we're going to be able to do. So there's some talks about potentially doing a barbecue, a group barbecue, something like that. So because we're not allowed to rent the night, we're not allowed to get a loan of the night or anything like that. So it might be more fun to just sit around and have a couple of brews and a couple of burgers or steak or whatever it is that they eat down south. So all of that is going to be featuring in our planning. We also have some detailed threads in there to talk about gear as well as comms gear, electronics, that kind of stuff. And as we get closer as well to the event, we've had some conversations around potentially even doing some gaming on voice chat to get accustomed to what we sound like on comms. I mean, obviously, y'all know what I sound like, but I have no idea what you sound like. So that will be helpful, as well as how can we, maybe practice some of the different protocols we might have in place just to get familiar with the lingo and the flow of conversations, and that will help out a little bit as well. So that's something that we are looking into, and yeah, it's all happening in there. So if you're interested, like I said, join the Discord, drop me a DM if you're already in there or what have you, and then we'll add you to add you to the chat. The other part of this is the Storm Riders Foreign Legion. I believe I mentioned this on a previous podcast. This is a fantastic idea that was brought up, and as you all know, I'm obsessed, perhaps, with the French Foreign Legion, La Légion Étrangère. I find it so fascinating, and so the idea of having our very own Storm Riders Foreign Legion, a group of players that are part of our community, that when we go to an event or when you go to an event with other members, that can be the patch that you wear when you want to squad up with other members of our community. I thought this was such a cool idea. So as I mentioned, I believe in one of our last episodes, there is a contest that's open until the end of October to do a design for the Foreign Legion. Now, this is not like a contest in the sense of everyone is going to vote on it. The admins and myself are going to select the design we like the most, and whoever has a winning design, we will pay them fair market value for it, so that we can have the rights to use that on our on any merch, flags, patches, etc. So if you can submit as many designs as you want. All the details again are on the Discord. We've had a couple of submissions that are really cool. There's a few. Some of the guys have been sharing them. A few others that have been emailed and DM'd to me directly. Really, really cool. And I'm not sold on any of them right out the gate. Like the contest is still absolutely open. So if you have any suggestions, any things that you think might actually make a good design but don't have the skills to make it yourself, maybe you can talk to someone on the Discord to help you out and make your design come to life. Collaborate. What the vibe of the Discord is. What the vibe of the Foreign Legion, the Storm Riders Foreign Legion is. It's all about inclusion and fun, and going out there and doing the best you can, but not taking yourself too seriously. Those are the kinds of things that are important to us as a group. Those are the kinds of values that we share. And so those are the kinds of things we want to see reflected in our designs. But I know that as soon as we have something, I will, I'll share it with you. And to be honest, like if any of the designs, like we're not happy with any of the designs, or there's not one that we really feel encompasses what we want, then we'll go back to the drawing board. But I will tell you, I mean, there are certain ones that I'll be absolutely happy with already. So just something to consider. I am super, super fond of this idea. I think it's really cool. Nothing will please me more than having a flag with our Foreign Legion logo on it, signed by everyone who went to Iron Horse, and then just getting that framed and putting it, in my studio. Like that would be the coolest thing that I could possibly imagine. So I'm just absolutely just thrilled at this idea, and I can't wait to see this come to life in the next couple of weeks and months. So that's really the wrap up about Iron Horse. I know there's also the physical training for Iron Horse that I've been under, with all my running and trail running and endurance and all that kind of stuff. And in addition to that, I'm going to be incorporating now some strength training and some hypertrophy work and stuff to just get a little bit stronger, to get a little bit leaner. All of which is going to help as well in the heat of Georgia, being a little bit leaner, certainly. So if you're thinking about attending this event, you got 8 months to get ready. That's so much time, right? It's so much time. If you're not in good shape right now, 8 months is so long to get in much better shape than you are. So don't hesitate. If you're curious about it, why not join us? And yeah, I really hope that we're going to keep talking about it, but I hope to motivate some of you to maybe take the plunge. So there we go. The last thing I want to talk about today is our channel overall, and just get to share some thoughts. So, as I mentioned in the intro to this episode, many of you might not know that we actually have a YouTube channel. Maybe you listen exclusively on a podcast listening platform, as I mentioned, maybe it's Spotify or whatever, Google Podcasts, etc. Maybe you are listening because you joined the Discord and you didn't necessarily realize that we have a channel and we have a backlog, a catalog of videos spanning many years now. I think well over 5 or 6 years of videos. Our entire airsoft content started with the YouTube channel, with one of our very first videos being like tips for beginners, right? That has been the MO for our content since its inception, really. Creating educational content that our viewers or listeners could watch and learn from our experience, learn from our mistakes, basically doing the things that not falling into the same pitfalls that we might have fallen into over the years. And really, that has continued on throughout all of our content. Even the podcast has really been about educating, getting people to think about airsoft differently, to think about their own airsoft and how they practice and how they apply some of the concepts and how they get the most out of every time they go out. And for the longest time before the podcast, especially in pre-pandemic, it was really all about creating videos, right? It was about every month, more or less, we would upload a new video to the channel, and the channel might have been 8 to 10 minutes, sometimes a little bit longer than that, talking about different types of educational content, whether it was like talking about gear or we did a video on exercise and fitness with Chris many moons ago, talking about offside shooting. And the channel has took many different iterations. We took different types of approaches. Initially, I thought, hey, why don't we get everybody in front of the camera, everybody on the team get in front of the camera at some point to talk about something that they were an expert at, or the team's expert at, let's call it. So we had a video about with Pat talking about AEG upgrades. That's many years ago now. We had a video with Cal doing like a gear overview of all of his stuff. We had a video with Miles, who is no longer with the team, doesn't really play airsoft anymore. But talking about I can't even remember, it was ergonomics or something like that. So we tried to get everybody through, and the reality is that, well, firstly, not everyone is interested in being in front of the camera, which is absolutely legit. And also, not everyone is interested and comfortable in sharing that type of content. Like having a script, reading a script is not something that everyone wants to do. So ultimately, it gravitated more towards me creating these videos and being sort of the main person in front of the camera, with a little bit of Chris every now and then eventually it just primarily became me. And this was also as a result of just ease of production, right? To peel the curtain back on creating content, I mean, it is production work. And so what that means is you need to have studio space, you need to have, lights and a camera setup and all this kind of stuff. And then you also need to have people. Well, if you're doing it by yourself, like I am, and then another person, coordinating with that other person can be a bit more challenging. Whereas, well, now I have a studio set up, I can just go shoot whenever I want, and so it becomes easier for me to produce that content. So that's certainly one thing. But once we started doing the podcast, it really it really allowed us to start creating content in a much easier way. Recording the podcast is pretty straightforward. I mean, I record the podcast, and then there's very little editing that goes into it. Sometimes a little bit, depending on sort of what happens during the recording. But most of the time, it's just straight from the camera onto, with a one cut for the intro, and then it goes up, and that's it. And so it allows us to create content weekly in a way that's not overbearing in terms of the amount of workload. Our other videos, I think it's important for people to understand, like we would do one a month, because that's not my job. I have a regular job that I work, 37 and a half hours a week at, and then I have a life around that. And so these videos take many hours to shoot, and then also many hours to edit, right? To chop down, to find cover, to find whatever, right? B-roll, whatever it is, to make it as seamless and as clean a product as we can provide for you. Again, if you are only listening to this podcast, you can see a video version on our channel. It's at Storm Riders on YouTube. And you should definitely check it out. And if you scroll back, you will start to see some of our other videos that are not podcast videos. The challenge that I have right now, and this is certainly something that I would solicit opinions from all of you, is that if you go to our channel now, you primarily see Call Your Hits episodes, because we have one coming out every week. So or more or less, we have one coming out every week. So every week you have this new video. And that kind of drowns out all the other longer format videos that we have, like educational videos. And I'm not really sure how I want to do that. If I want to keep it that way, or if I want to maybe split off the Call Your Hits podcast from the main channel. So if you have an opinion on that, I'd love to hear it either in the comments, or you can hit us up on Discord, or what have you. But it's certainly something to consider, because fundamentally, I'm not really recording a lot of educational videos outside of the podcast anymore. I don't believe I did any of that at all this summer. Now, to be fair, there's a lot of stuff going on in the summer, and the winter is typically the time where we record other videos. But regardless, I'm not sure if that's something that we really are going to necessarily continue doing too much if people aren't interested in them. So with that being said, I would love to hear from you about what kinds of educational videos would you like to see more of. Whenever I ask people, as a side note, whenever I ask people, it's like, oh, what kind of videos should we make? People are always like, giveaways, right? Oh, do giveaway, do this. And it's like, bro, we don't have anything to give away, right? This channel operates at a net deficit. It costs me money to run this channel. We don't have stuff to give, right? So, but what we can give you is knowledge. It's our experience, our points of view. And so we'd love to hear about the kinds of things that you'd like to see us do more of outside of the Call Your Hit podcasts. Some of the things that we've done in the past a little bit was reacting to viewer footage. We did a few of those episodes, and those were really fun. I'm not sure if that's something that's of interest to you guys, but if it is, you can certainly let us know. The other thing that we can certainly do, we've talked about like tactics and training and those types of things. Certainly something we can continue doing if you find value. We can also do gear overviews. Now, one thing we've never really done is gear reviews, because firstly, we don't get paid by any companies to provide reviews on their gear, which is not something that we're A, interested in, or B, don't really have, again, the funding to go out there and just buy gear and tell you what we think of it. But we can tell you about the gear that we use and why we use it and how we have it set up. And if that's something that's of interest to you, we'd love to hear that as well. Some of the videos that I have in the hopper, so to speak, to release in the future, the one about going prone and sort of how it's actually not useful. It's actually a very good tactical tool. Also talking about my helmet, doing an overview of how I have my helmet set up. and why I have it that way. Spoiler alert: it's for Iron Horse. But regardless, to show you how I have it set up, and maybe that's something you can take away from it. But if there's other types of gear, if there's other things that you'd like to us to talk about, whether that's myself or one of the other Storm Riders, whether that's Chris or Cal or Pat or Steph or whomever, right? There's a whole crew of us. And if there's someone you'd like to hear more of, we can certainly make that happen as well. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that from the channel's point of view. Again, if you haven't checked out the channel, I would highly encourage you to do that. If you've made it this far in the video and you do know about our channel, just make sure you're subscribed, because obviously, those are the things that make the YouTube algorithm turn. Engagement, subscriptions. To be clear, we don't have any aspirations of being a big YouTube channel, right? Would I love for this to be my full-time job? I mean, sure, yeah, that'd be great. But realistically, there is a very small airsoft market in social media, especially given the fact that our channel is only English speaking, right? If you look at the broader world, there's tons of airsoft being played in lots of countries that don't speak English, whether that's Portugal, France, Brazil, anywhere, right? Germany, etc., right? So our market is obviously just the English speaking world. Um, and that market is pretty saturated, and we know the kinds of videos that are really popular in airsoft. Sniper headshot compilations. There's a running joke that if I want to make one of our videos to be super popular, I just have to name it something like Navy SEAL plays airsoft for the first time and destroys everyone with sniper headshots, cheater compilation, 360 scope cam, whatever. Like, do something like that, and then immediately you get all the clicks. But that's not the type of content that we make. That's not the type of content that I'm interested in making. Like, I'm not going to sell myself doing that kind of stuff just to get views. Like, there's no sense in that. So really, I want to stay focused on making the kinds of content that I find interesting, obviously, but B, the kind of content that you find interesting. You came to our airsoft channel, you came to our Discord, you came to our podcast, presumably because something that we do is of interest to you, because it calls to you in some way. We provide something to you that maybe you don't get very many other in other places. It could be camaraderie. It could be because you feel part of our community, in which case I love that. I love the fact that we have this community and you and I have this relationship where we basically chat, every week, or even more frequently if you're on the Discord. I love that, right? But it could also be because you want to hear our points of view on certain tactics, certain pieces of gear, certain whatever. And if you want to hear more of those, I definitely want to know about that so that we can provide more of that to you. So that's sort of my appeal to you guys, to say, listen, we're here to provide you the kind of content that you want to watch. And in order to do that, letting us know the kinds of things that you are interested in would certainly help. Now, that being said, we do have, like I said, some things that are in the hopper in terms of future content. In particular, I'd love for you, if you haven't checked it out already. At a few months ago, we released our full overview of Operation Last Refuge 2. This was like the full game review with like drone footage. We had like obviously photos, etc., but like we've got maps in there. It took a long time for me to edit that video. If you haven't watched it yet, I would love for you to go watch that video. Give it a like if you like it, leave a comment in there as well. Those are the kinds of videos that are so much fun, and they really showcase the kind of community that we have here in St. John's, Newfoundland, in particular for this one. So yeah, we have our channel. We have videos that are coming. We want to make more videos that are of our interest to you. As you all know, I mean, winter is a down season for us, so it becomes even more easy for me to produce this type of content. So let me know what you'd like, and I'd love to be able to make some of those videos for you. So yeah, that's really all that I want to talk about today. I so appreciate you listening. I hope you found this at least, very least, entertaining, something to listen to. I know Pat's not here, and I'm sure we all miss his deep voice and his hearty chortles. But he'll be back with us next week, so no need to worry about that. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate it. Like I said, if you haven't checked out the channel yet, please do so. Make sure to join the Discord if you haven't already. And give this video a like, give one of our other videos a like, engage with our content, and that would be very much appreciated. So that's really all I've got for you this week. Thanks again so much for listening, and I'll talk to you next week.